Hello, everybody. Welcome back to This Day in History. It is May 29th, 2024, and it's a shorter list because there wasn't a whole lot going on. We have some pretty interesting birthdays, though. Some American icons, one being an entertainer and actor, the other being a politician who just happens to be a distant relative of mine. We got authors, we have basketball players, statesmen, and we have some notable points of history. We have the sacking of an empire. We have a major defeat in a battle, and so let's just get into it, shall we? So the first birthday it's 1736, and he is an American icon. He's one of our founding fathers, Patrick Henry. He was a statesman. He was an orator. He was someone who rallied the colonists to really get behind the American Revolution. I believe he was the one that was quoted as saying, "Give me liberty or give me death," unless I'm thinking of someone else. But he was a pretty influential guy in fanning the flames of liberty, as it were, into really get the movement going. And so that was Patrick Henry. In 1860, Spanish composer Isaac Albéniz was born, and I'm not a big classic music buff, so I really don't know anything about the guy. You always hear you hear the greats. You hear Mozart, you hear Beethoven, you hear Tchaikovsky, you hear in America we had Sousa. He was, but and there's so many more composers out there that were just extremely talented, extremely gifted. I've never heard his work, but Albéniz was born on this day. British author G.K. Chesterton was born on this day in 1874. 1903, Bob Hope. If you know who Bob Hope is, he was born in 1903. He was an American singer. He was an actor. He did, the whole song and dance routine. He was in movies. He was really big on participating with the USO. He was real big on going to the military, entertaining the troops, bringing them some laughs, some joy, some song and dance, whatever. He was there to entertain them while they were fighting in country. He had visited troops during World War II. He had visited troops, I believe, during Korea. I think he visited troops during every conflict that he was alive. He did go to Vietnam and visit the troops there. He was he was just an interesting entertainer. So the next birthday is on this day in 1917. John F. Kennedy would be born. And I mean, if you don't know who JFK is, then history has failed you. He was I believe he was the 33rd president of the United States. He was the youngest president elected, not to be confused with the youngest president. Teddy Roosevelt was actually the youngest president, and he inherited that job when his boss was killed. And then by the time he was legitimately elected himself, he was older than, or he was right around the age of what Kennedy was when he was assassinated. But Kennedy was the youngest elected president in our history. He had a pretty interesting career as president, even though it didn't even last one term. He only lasted about two and a half years before he'd be assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. What a lot of people don't realize is just how good of a president he really was. There's always going to be detractors out there that say that he was a bad president, but in his short time, I'll say this about Kennedy, in his short time, and a lot of people don't realize this, is that he kept the United States from going to war 6 times during his short presidency. The Warhawks wanted to go to war. He did not. He did not want to go to Vietnam, even though he did send more advisors there. He was not in favor of fighting a prolonged conflict in Vietnam, whereas everyone else around him was. Johnson was all for it. Actually, his brother Bobby wanted to go. Kennedy was a World War II veteran. He served in the Navy. He was got himself into a little bit of trouble, and came that close to getting kicked out of the Navy. But his dad kind of wheeled and dealed for him, and so what they did is they switched command. So he normally would have been involved in the Atlantic, but he was switched over to the Pacific Fleet, and he was a PT boat commander in the Pacific. One night his PT boat was hit by a Japanese destroyer. 2 men were lost. 4 other men, I believe, were severely wounded. And JFK finds an island, and they all swim to that island, but they find that island doesn't have potable water. So he had to go swim elsewhere, miles away, to go find another island that did have potable water, and then he swam back to that island where he left his men, and then he had them all go out and swim to the other island where there was potable water, and then they were all summarily rescued, sometime later. That's who President Kennedy was. And I've been wondering when his birthday was, because I'm just too lazy to look it up, but now I know. It's on this day, May 29th. And I knew that he was born in 1917 because he was born about 10 years before my grandfather. But yeah, President Kennedy's birthday is today. Rest in peace wherever you are, cousin. Last birthday is 1984. Carmelo Anthony, he's an American basketball player. He was born on this day. And I didn't like Carmelo Anthony, but I didn't dislike him either. I'm not really a huge basketball fan, hardly anymore. I used to be when the Blazers were real hot, and they'd go to the playoffs every year, and then when they stopped caring about the playoffs, and that's kind of when I tuned out. They're kind of like my hometown. I mean, well, I'm not from Portland. I'm from a Portland suburb, but that was the team to root for. So let's go back to this day in history. We're done with the birthdays. On this day, 1453, Constantinople, and summarily the Byzantine Empire, which was the last vestige of the Roman Empire, it would fall on this day, and the Ottoman Empire would take over. The Ottomans had basically they besieged Constantinople. They took over. They eventually sacked it. And then they occupied it. So I believe Constantinople is what is now present-day Istanbul. I could be mistaken, but I'm not sure. But I think that's what happened. So we're going to move right along, right up to the 19th century. In 1848, Wisconsin becomes the 30th state to be admitted into our union. They're the 30th state. What can you say about a bunch of cheeseheads? I'm kidding. They are known for their cheese. And when I lived in Kentucky, I did have some Wisconsin cheese, and I got to tell you that, this is me talking my personal opinion, just my personal opinion. Nothing is better than Tillamook cheese here in Oregon. Nothing. So, I'm sorry, all you folks in Wisconsin, but I still believe that our cheese is better than yours. Personal preference. We'll just leave it at that. Personal preference. So, in 1905, we have a pretty major battle, and it's actually one of the greatest blunders of Tsar Nicholas II. It's 1905. The Russo-Japan War is going on. I'm not sure really what kind of kicked off the war between Russia and Japan, but Tsar Nicholas II was a little bit brash. He didn't want to be. His biggest problem was, I think, at that age, was ego. Well, actually, I think, as good of a man as he was, and I have a lot of respect for him, as good of a man as he was, he did have a bit of an ego about him. He had a hard time giving up his throne because he truly felt that it was his. He was ordained by God to be in charge, to be, the Tsar, and so he didn't want to give up. He thought it was a sin against God to give up his rulership. The best word that could really describe Tsar Nicholas II is you could describe him as being affable. He was well-intentioned, but he just he did not have a finger on reality whatsoever. While he was making slow changes for his people, they just weren't fast enough for him, and that's what led to the powder keg that was the Bolshevik Revolution. Right? This incident in 1905 kind of starts to lead to that. It kind of starts to lead to the beginning of the end for him and his dynasty, his his ruling family. I mean, you got to remember, the Romanovs had been in charge for over 300 years. They had been the rulers of Russia for over 300 years. So, the Battle of Shunima, I think I pronounced it right. The Japanese Navy soundly defeat the Russian Navy. Now, the thing is, Nicholas was actually advised not to go to war against Japan. He was advised to not send basically the only fleet. He was advised against sending the fleet to go fight the Japanese Navy in the first place, because it was the only real standing navy that naval fleet that the Russians had. And he was so convinced in the moral superiority of his cause that he was like, we'll be fine. Well, the problem is, at the Battle of Shunima, the Russian Navy was soundly defeated. And what that did is that gave a big ego booster to Japan. Because what you're going to find is over the next 40 years, they're so emboldened that they literally think that they're untouchable. And that's what led to them, engaging especially in the 20s or more 30s really, but they started aggressively occupying their neighbors during the 30s, which led to World War II. And a lot of it is because they had battles like the Battle of Tsushima that actually emboldened them into thinking that they were untouchable. So one man's folly would end up becoming another nation's eventual folly. Because, the Japanese lost the war and they were put in their place. But enough about that. 1905, the Russian fleet is soundly defeated by Japan. 1942, Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was an American entertainer of that era. He was known for his singing, his dancing, his acting work. He did movies. He recorded. He recorded records. He did it all. He records his White Christmas album, and that's the dummy light telling me I need gas, which I knew that. He records White Christmas, and White Christmas goes down in history as having been the best-selling single of all time. We fast forward to 1999, the year my nephew was born. Excuse me. Pardon me. On this day in 1999, the Space Shuttle Discovery would be the first shuttle to ever dock with the International Space Station. That happened on this day in 1999, so, that was 25 years ago today. And last on this list, 2017, Manuel Noriega. And if you don't know who Manuel Noriega was, Manuel Noriega dies on this day in 2017. He would die at the age of 83. Manuel Noriega was the Panamanian military dictator in the late 80s. He was a CIA asset for a time. In the late 80s, we had a conflict down there. In 1989, we had sent troops down there to basically go get him. Now, remember when I said he was a CIA asset? Okay, he was a partner to the CIA until he started biting the hand that fed him, like most of our assets do. Bin Laden, is another example of an asset that bit the hand that fed it. But so Panamanian forces down there, they're starting to get emboldened, and they're attacking American servicemen down there, and not just the servicemen's families as well. There was a documented case where Panamanian soldiers had captured a Navy officer and his wife. They were out night on the town. They weren't doing anything wrong. They were just heading back home. Panamanian military soldiers stopped them, quarantined them. They basically incarcerated him while they raped her. And it was a lot of stuff like this that was happening, and enough was enough. And Bush Sr., the first President Bush, sent Delta Force, the Army, some Navy SEALs, sent a significant force down there, and we had a fight. We fought it out with the Panamanian Army. Manuel Noriega escapes, and he escapes to the Vatican, and which is sovereign that's considered a sovereign nation, so we couldn't touch him. So what we did is we surrounded the Vatican, and we told the Vatican to give him up. And the Vatican said, nope. And so the Vatican embassy was sieged by the U.S. Army, and they put up big speakers and they played loud rock and roll all day and all night, to the point where they basically pissed off the Vatican, so to the point where they were like, we are done with this nonsense, and they handed him over. He was brought to the United States. He was put on trial for basically narcotics distribution. That is what his asset was with the CIA, is that he was the narcotics connection. And any of you who don't think that the CIA doesn't use the sale of narcotics to fund their black ops, get with reality, because that's exactly what they do. So, because that's what kind of an asset Noriega was. I have a sneaking suspicion that Bin Laden kind of started out that way, being that he was in Afghanistan, and we were helping him fight off the Russians in Afghanistan. He probably had control of the poppy in Afghanistan, and, drugs make big money, and big money is what you need to fund your black ops and your private wars. So the CIA is known to do this. They just are nonchalant about it, and they're like, whatever. So, but yeah, Manuel Noriega, because, I'm sure that we diplomatically said, hey, we need to have this cease, and he, basically was like, I don't give a shit. And it got to the point where President Bush was like, well, okay then, here's the deal. And the other thing that was very important about that is, there's this thing called the Panama Canal, right? It's where ships go through. It's a shortcut. Instead of having to go all the way south down to the southernmost point of South America, to go down and back up around again, to go from Atlantic to Pacific. So it was very important. It's a strategic point there. And, so we needed to make sure that the canal was free for commerce. So, at any rate, long story short, he's captured eventually. He's brought to the United States. He's put on trial, and he serves a prison sentence in the United States. He serves a prison sentence in Panama. But it is on this day in 2017 that he will die at the age of 83. And, and I shouldn't say this, but it's kind of one of those things where he is one of those people in this world where you want to say good riddance to bad rubbish. So, there you go. He could have reformed his life at the end. He could have repented. I don't know. But he wasn't a nice guy. So, that is it. That is this day in history. I'm going to go get me some gas so I can go to work. You have a fantastic day. Have a blessed day. Be safe and all that other good stuff. And we'll do it again tomorrow for this day in history for May 30th. Have a good one. Take care. Goodbye.